identify investment opportunities in Nigeria's mental health environment. Who else deserves to come on stage and give us our first lecture, Building and Sustaining Investments in Mental Health? No other than Dr. Vincent Udenze. I would really appreciate a thunderous round of applause for him as he takes on the stage. What an incredible and impressive resume. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, the Governor of Lagos State, ably represented by the Deputy Governor, please permit me to stand on existing protocol. My name is Vincent Dr. Udenze. Yes, I am a consultant psychiatrist. I currently practice in the United Kingdom. I've been there for the last 20 years. Almost in the same period, I have been opportuned to seek out gaps in services that's available for private sector provider, hence some of the projects that we've embarked on. Yes, we've been able to establish 8 treatment centers, Mangoro, Lekki, Port Harcourt, Anambra State, and Abuja. We have an IT company that develops apps. We have been able to build a national database for the Nigerian police. We've been able to set up a strictly dedicated mental health pharmacy service. We have an art therapy service, and so on. I guess it's because of my involvement in all this that I was found suitable to give a talk on building and sustaining investment in mental health. I plan to take you through a bit of a journey in this because as much as government keeps talking about private sector investment, typically it always comes across that we want private sector people to put in their money, build more facilities to complement government because government cannot do it alone. But that's what's one side of the story. I'm here to also talk to you about a different way of actually perceiving this, and hopefully I should do it in 30 minutes. I think I'm not allowed to use my slides. Fantastic. Okay, there it is. So there's a dot there. Let me see, just go back. Right, so that's kind of the map of the world. And there's a little red dot there that represents where Lagos practically is. And that's just because Lagos is big, Lagos is important in the whole world, and we are talking about this megacity. I looked at the abstract, and there were some buzzwords that stood out when I read that abstract, which is the fact that you are looking for a multi-sectoral. That means you need different sectors to come together. You also are looking at providing a service that will involve investment, and you want to build a case for this. So typically, they talk about the fact that in a presentation, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to say it, and I'm going to tell you what I've said. So I'm going to have an introductory section to it. There will be a bit of an overview that will focus on the current model of delivery, and I'm going to make some recommendations. Now, last night, the other speaker, Professor Migbodun, and I had dinner together. He's a consultant obstetrician gynecologist. And I told him I was going to pick on him today. So I want to talk about the peculiarity and some of the differences between service provision for his patients and mine. His patients love to see him, mine don't, not all the time, right? So it's quite difficult to see that screen. Maybe permit me to look sideways, okay? So in discussing some of these peculiarities, We know that there are patients, mental health patients, that need the service, correct? They need mental health services. But some don't want the service, even though they need it. Some are afraid of the service, even though they need it. And quite interestingly, some don't want to be associated with the service, even though they need it. Now, think about Professor Mibodun's patients, the women who are pregnant. Are they afraid of his service? Do they fear being associated with the service? Okay. Treatment and post-discharge. So for some of them, they need the service. They go into hospital, they get the treatment, they get discharged, and they disengage from the service. So even though they need the service, even though they had the service, even though they benefited from the service, they disengage from the service and they relapse. That's an interesting journey, isn't it? Okay. Another group. Public perception. So we know stigma from the public, stigma from family members, stigma from professionals. Have you ever been to A&E? Now, again, sorry, Prof. So a pregnant woman in labor comes in, what happens? Everybody runs around them. Oh my goodness, call this, call that, call this. Yeah? When my patients sometimes hit the A&E, sometimes call them to come and take their patient. Who are the them? Psychiatrists? Their patients? So that's our own colleagues referring to us as them and our patients as their patient. It happens. So even our own professionals can stigmatize. Then, gentlemen of the press, you too. Now let's think of an advert, that talks about maternal care. You see a pregnant woman, nicely dressed, the skin is glowing. Even you want to become pregnant until you realize, I'm even a man, I can't get pregnant, because she looks so good. Now let's think about when the media wants to portray mental disorder. You will see one Rastafari with dreadlocks running around the streets. Is that mental health? So even the media sometimes do not do justice to us in the terms of how they portray our specialty. I talked about the fact that mental health is poorly funded. Okay, that's fine. Now, let's look at some important issues in funding mental health services. Let's see if that works. Let's look at the current model. Typically, services are provided by government, the private sector, and CSOs or NGOs. That we typically know. There might be others. She's moving faster than I planned. All right. So His Excellency the Governor, so I'm just trying to illustrate how this is going to work. So the governor decides that he's got money, let's say 50 billion for health, correct? And they decide that maybe 1 billion has to go to mental health services. So he releases the money to our Honorable Commissioner and his PAMSEC to say, you're going to give 1 billion towards mental health services. Different states will have different pathways from getting this money, to the people. So what do? They pass the money to the state mental health services to provide the service to the people. You understand? So that's how the money comes down, and they need to get the services across to those people. Okay, that's the current model. Then they decide to expand. What do you get? You need big land. You need to award big projects. You need heavy staffing. You need massive overheads, management, supervision, quality control when you want to expand your mental health services. The current model. Now, what seems to be happening at the moment is that if you look at the rate of population increase, compare it to the service provision, you will see that over time, the population is getting larger and the service provision for the people is not going at the same rate as the population growth. That means the gap will continue to increase. So unless we do something significant about this, in 10 years' time, it's even going to be wider. So it's not good enough to just say we are improving or increasing services. We really have to be sure that we are also matching population growth. So I was going to use this to kind of illustrate service provision. So let's think of a family. A man has, just a family, you've got a garden and you want to put a poultry there, right? And you ask your son to set up the poultry and look after it. So some will argue that sometimes the parents might not supervise it very well because he's your son. Some will say that the son will do very well because it's family business, so there's an ownership mentality. So imagine you split the garden into two, then you get a private sector person to do the same thing on that poultry, the back garden, so you pay him, right? Some will argue, pay the private sector person and he'll do it very well. Some will say no, he won't have ownership mentality, it's not his thing, he's not going to look after it. There will always be the question, if you see a swollen pocket of somebody walking across, would it be eggs in there? If it's your son, would you ask your son, come, let me see your pocket? Or would you not? All we can say here is that there are advantages and disadvantages, strengths and weaknesses to having government services and also to having private sector-driven services. And the most effective will always be a combination of the two. We need the government to be viable, and we need private sector to also be viable. And the combination, the synergy, will probably give you the best mental health service in Lagos State. So let's think about the journey for those of us in private sector. We need to find a place to set up. So most times we are renting, so most times we are renting a property that is not suited for mental health service delivery. It's usually somebody's house. We try and tweak it to suit the purpose. It's expensive to rent if you need a good place, right? The high cost of setting up will be transferred to the patient. The patient has to pay for all that, so it becomes prohibitive. We don't have enough government private sector partnerships. So what ends up happening is the private sector services are seen as elitist services because you're always expensive, because you bear all the cost and you transfer all the cost to the patient. While the government service is seen to be cheap, because sometimes we forget that government services are subsidized. So the government puts an amount of money in those hospitals to subsidize treatment. So let's start looking at the way forward. Let's talk about a concept not very new to many people, but this concept of commissioning services. So what is commissioning? Commissioning is the process of assessing needs, planning and prioritizing, purchasing and monitoring health services to get the best health outcomes. So what does that mean? the government will assess the needs of the people of the state, plan and prioritize what it needs to do. Purchase, and monitor. That means that government can purchase through government hospitals to provide the service to the people, and government can purchase through the private sector to provide the services to the people. The concept of commissioning. So again, this is where I'm going to use another illustration. Forget about my figures, it's just, for illustrative purposes. So Lagos State government decides to build, say, a 30-bedded hospital, 20 male, 10 female beds, 80 outpatients every week you have to see. Just stay away from the figures, it's not, factual, just for illustrative purposes only. So the government will spend, say, 500 million to build a structure, equip it, put staff, and spend 100 million every year to maintain, pay staff salaries, and run the service, correct? Okay. But what the government is going to decide to do now is to say, okay, you hold on a minute. I'm going to put this out for a bid. So they're going to use Lekki Aja axis. And the Honorable Commissioner and the PAMSEC now goes, right, who is going to provide this service? And you should all bid for it. Professor Adewuya decides to say from Lagos State that he can do it, that the government can do it. So he's going to bid for that service. We have an Olive Prime treatment center in Lekki. Their private sector, they say they can also provide that service to the people of Lekki, Aja. When they submit their bid, the permanent secretary and the commissioner will then look at it and see that, wait a minute, we can even decide to give this private sector 100 million seed money. We don't have to spend that whole 500 million. And then actually, it's only going to cost us 60 million as the subsidy to give to them to provide exactly that same service. So he's going to give this private organization 60 million every year so that he can demand that outpatient clinic appointment payment will be 500 naira. Admission will be 1,500 naira a night. The same cost as you get in government hospitals. So he can commission the private sector to provide exactly the same service, and they now take on the responsibility of monitoring what the private sector is providing. So it ends up being cheaper, more effective, but don't forget what I said earlier. It's not private sector versus government. The case we are making today is private sector and government, and then government can fund private sector to provide the services to its people. The government really only cares about its people. In between the government and the people are providers. Those providers can be government, can be private sector. It really shouldn't bother the Honorable Commissioner. He just wants fantastic service to the people of Lagos State. That's what he cares about. Cheap, effective. What are the other ways we can invest in private care delivery? Shares. There are a lot of people a lot of private sector organizations that have got novel ideas and are delivering services. Have you ever considered that the government can invest in those organizations so you can say you're providing this in Oshodi, this service in Oshodi. It's fantastic. It's 3,000 naira per service. The government is going to give you some money so that you can lower the cost to 1,000 so that more people can benefit from it. So you can actually invest in private sector initiatives. The first one of commissioning is that the government decides what they want to do and then they commission it out. The second one is that you actually look at what others are doing and say, I like that. I can actually put some money, lower the cost, and provide it to the people. Then, I talked about the fact that the government might need to set up a committee so that private sector CSOs, there needs to be a way that people can get to you. It mustn't be because you're connected. If you've got a brilliant idea, set up a framework so that people can submit their proposal. You can then look at it. It shouldn't be dependent on how long your leg is or how connected you are to be able to get a laudable project across to the ears of the government. I just use that to illustrate that, you know that you have Dangote refineries. NNPC government is investing in Dangote refineries. The Saudi Arabia government investing in American companies. A government investing in American companies is investments. So the government can also realize that this sector, these guys are doing very good. We can invest there and even demand a shareholding in that company because they have put in some equity. Now, positive discrimination. This has to do with land, allocation of land. I have a friend of mine, every 2 days, he sends me an email of an estate that I should buy, usually in Aja, Ekbeleki area. I'm always estate. And I always ask him, any provision for hospitals? He say, there's commercial, but there's always a long story. And you have to pay a lot more for that. So you have all these estates springing up, land springing up. Sometimes clinics are located, but hardly ever any purposeful discrimination to provide mental health services. So we would like the Honorable Commissioner, PAMSEC sir, to please look into this, talk to your other colleagues. You can decide that for a particular expanse of land, even if an estate provider, you must provide land for a mental health facility. And that facility, that should never be used for anything else. Because that way you start to get mental health institutions or facilities into the areas permanently, and it is planned. So we need this positive discrimination in Lagos State. Yeah. I think we still need to look at the importance of, again, getting proposals across to, government. Government needs to encourage partnerships. If I come to the Government Commission and say, I want to do this project for you, sir, send me back and say to me, Vincent, your organization, I want you to form a group and come to me. So you're going to force me to speak to other NGOs, speak to other providers, to put heads together and then come to you. To discourage just singular organizations, one man carrying briefcases, keep coming to people because they have connection. But when you force people to come together and work together, it's usually more productive. We need that kind of framework. So let's go for a paradigm shift in the way we look at things. The kids in school, I love the fact that there's a school program at the moment. Because for the investors, we need to invest in a fertile ground, fertile environment, isn't there? So my colleagues in Ops and Gynae are ever happy to build massive hospitals because a lot of women get pregnant and they'll come there. But if you ask a private person to invest, they will tell you, I can only invest maybe in Lekki or in this place or in that place, where they feel that the mindset of the people might accommodate what they are providing. So, if we want to change the mindset of Nigerians, or rather Lagosians, in 20 years' time to think differently, then you have to start sowing the seeds now in primary schools. So you have to develop a program that is aimed at changing their mindset. So you purposefully designed the program to change the mindset of those kids by the time they are 20. I'm not sure what's going on now. That's not me. IT? Sorry? Sorry about that. But I'll just continue to talk about what could happen in school. So what I was going to propose was that we have a program for kids in school that can help us do that. You look at the TV program. Yes, we normally get a situation where once in a while, if you're a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you get a phone call, come and give a talk on depression, come and give a talk on bipolar. Just once in a while. Most of the times it's last minute. They have nothing else to show. Dr. Bonju, where are you? Can you pop into the station and talk about this? No. We are saying that it has to be planned. It would be nice to see Lagos State government say to the local TV station, we want a program specifically designated to mental health, running year-round. That way you can plan. It stops being about half-minute talk about depression, half-minute talk about bipolar. You can plan it, you understand? And we think that we need such. Well, fantastic. Yeah, I was also talking about the fact that it's important to get influencers to discuss mental health. You have a lot of actors in Lagos State, people that musicians. We need their input into this. There's something that happens in the UK now. When the government is expanding its mental health service provision, and they're bringing in what we call new money, and they're now forcing hospitals to say, you have to give about 20% of your budget to a private sector providers. So you've decided, like you have your helpline, right? If the helpline is, for example, paid for by the Lagos State government, you will now say, we need a helpline, but we're going to fund a private sector organization to provide that. So a certain percentage of your budget goes towards CSOs, private sector organizations, to provide the service, because the government recognizes they are an integral part of your service providers. Finally, as an investor, I have to ask myself a question. Do I just come here and say, well, provide all the, enabling environment for private sector people to do work? Or do I also come here and challenge the Honorable Commissioner, the Governor, the PAMSEC, and tease them with a project? And I've decided to do just that. So, we've got 8 organizations in our consortium. One of them a few years ago, the Inspector General of Police, IGP Adamu, and I had a meeting, and I took a project to him. So we are the ones building the national database for lost and found items for Nigeria. It's being built by a company at no cost to the Nigerian police. He was surprised that we could do that. The second picture there is myself and General Marwa. The NDLA, for the first time, will now have its own urine drug test kits branded for them. We are producing it for the NDLA at no cost to the NDLA. So my question now is, what can we do at no cost to Lagos? And someone said to me, you dey craze? Lagos get money. So, I love technology, and if I take you back to that graph that I showed you, where the population is rising steeply and mental health service provision is really, really crawling, usually one of the fastest things that can bridge a gap in the world of today is technology. It's technology. So I have decided that we will build a mental health app application for Lagos State at no cost to Lagos State government. Last night, Dr. Tolu came to see me Interestingly, he forced me to send my slides to him before I did this presentation. So I think he looked at what I was going to do. He was laughing. So, and I said to him that it's one thing to also do this, but the world is moving towards you owning your own data. At the moment, what you do is you go to psychiatric hospital, you see the doctor, he inputs your information into their system, and it stays there. Tomorrow, you have to go and see a dermatologist. You go there, you input your information into that other one. Next week, you have a mental illness. You end up in Abeokuta. Nobody knows who you are. They stick all sorts of needles in you. They don't have no data on you, despite the fact that you've been to several hospitals. So we are proposing a system where you actually own your data. So wherever you go, the system, once you integrate EMR into it, the clinicians will update that system. So wherever you go, you have your data. So if I want to see a skin doctor, I choose what amount of my information I'm going to release to you before you consult me. You own your data. So the next step of that development is to get into that. So we are just saying that we can't do this. We'll do the first part for you free of charge so that Lagosians can have a mental health app. We're happy to sit down with relevant stakeholders to agree on what, we have an idea of what should be in it. But obviously, in partnership with the Ministry of Health, we are welcome to see what you want to put into it. The second part of what we want to do for Lagos State is a school program. So our NGO, Reconnect Health Development Initiative, we did a lot of things on drugs. I was the consultant to the Northern Governors' Wives Forum, in their drug agenda. I remember when the Northern Governors themselves, I did a presentation in Kaduna, and Governor Shetima asked the president to declare a state of emergency in terms of drug use in northern Nigeria. So there's been a lot of work that I've done more in the north than actually in the south. But our NGO program is actually willing to develop a program specifically geared towards changing the mindset of the younger ones in schools so that come 15, 20 years' time, they will perceive mental health differently. Awareness is important, but when you target changing the mindset, it's a slightly different program. And we're happy to develop this program and deliver it to Lagos State at no cost to Lagos State. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, again, my name is Vincent, Dr. Udenze. I am a psychiatrist. I told you what I was going to say to you. Then I told you. And in summary, I've been able to flag up. See, the IT here is failing me. Okay. Okay, it's not really. But at the end of the day, it just meant to summarize. I'm going to show you what I've said to you in terms of the challenges, how we can finance it, and some of the things that we can bring to the table to move things forward. Thank you for listening to me. God bless.
Thank you very, very, very much, Dr. Vincent. Wow. 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 A mental health app for Lagosians at no cost, a school program. You know, when he was saying we need to, mental awareness is good, but also we need to target and send information when they are younger so that their mindsets will change at an early age. I thought passion. I just thought this man is truly passionate about what he does. Thank you very much once again, and really appreciate what you're doing. And Lagos is truly working, and I cannot wait to see what happens in the next few years. Our global viewers are watching, and I would like to say thank you for watching. Now, the Facebook page is called Lagos Mind, so please like the Facebook page. All the information will be there, the videos, and of course, that we're live streaming now, so people are watching us live. So after the event, it can be replayed and rewatched all over again. So